Welcome to the Business Building Blocks podcast, where we talk about struggles and celebrations that leaders and entrepreneurs experience on their journey to success. I'm your host, Kristina, and I'm passionate about helping you achieve massive amounts of success at work and at home. We'll talk about all things people and organizational wellness, share relatable stories, and feature insightful guests because quality people and processes are at the heart of every success story. Ready to learn, grow, and have fun? Let's dive in. Hello and welcome to the Business Building Blocks podcast. I'm your host, Kristina Schmidt. Today, I have a very special guest. His name is Will Murley. Will is a financial advisor with Equitable Advisors. So Will, welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kristina, for having me on the show. Grateful and happy to be here.
Awesome. So can you just tell us a bit about yourself? Like, who is Will and what do you do? That kind of thing.
Yeah, of course. Well, first, you mentioned I'm a financial advisor, so I just have some red tape to share, a disclaimer. So professionally, I'm a financial advisor with Equitable Advisors, LLC, a broker-dealer and FINRA SIPC member firm. I'm also an investment advisor representative with Equitable Advisors, LLC, an SEC registered investment advisor and insurance agent with Equitable Network, LLC. It's important for me to point out today on the show that nothing I say is intended nor should be relied upon as solicitation, recommendation, or offer of any insurance, investment, or other financial product or service. Nor should any part of my presentation here today be relied upon as any form of financial advice. So do your own research if you get any ideas, fun ideas from me, right?
Awesome.
But that's my little book blurb there professionally. But yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you for that. So tell us about you. Tell us about your family, that sort of thing.
Yeah, gosh, where do I start? So I suppose I'll start with family, right? I'm married, happily married to my beautiful wife, and we have a son. His name's Jason Paul. He turns 16 months and 16 months old in a couple weeks. And, I like to say he keeps us on our toes as he's learning to be on his. He's a ball of energy and an attitude in a fun way. And professionally, yeah, work in financial planning and help a lot of clients. I specialize in helping Catholic families and business owners. Part of a big network that is not Catholic, but several of us are, and that's our focus, right? We have one foot in the secular world, one foot in the Catholic, and bring that to help all my clients.
All right, awesome. So do you find that a challenge at all? Like if you're trying to, I don't know if you can advertise, but like if you're trying to kind of reach out to clients, do you find that a challenge?
Yeah, when we say reach out to clients, I mean prospective clients or existing clients?
Yes. Prospective clients.
Yeah, good question. So something that's fun about the Catholic world, and I guess I could have guessed it, but I didn't know it until I was in it, is that Catholics and Christians as well, like pick your religious group or group, right? People want to work with like-minded people who share their own values. So as a Catholic financial planner, like I just have an open door to a lot of conversations. Because fundamentally what I do is a people business, it's a trust business, it's a relationship business. I get a lot of open doors to groups, churches, individuals, and families, business owners. Those doors wouldn't open unless, we were both Catholic, right? If we weren't, then that just wouldn't happen. So I think it's a really big advantage that I have and also would recommend to anyone in the business world that especially the more client-facing and small business you are, the more values overlap matters with business.
I fully agree with that. So I do some Catholic leadership training and regular leadership training, just secular, but I do find that when I can bring that part in, there is a whole section of healing and just being wholly you when you bring your faith into your work. And I just find that so beautiful. So that is awesome. Yeah. My financial advisor is also, he's Christian, not Catholic, but I do find that helps. We can get into that sort of stuff and it feels good. So awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how did you choose to do Catholic financial advising? Like, how did that even come about?
Yeah. The story is I was a Catholic missionary for a number of years. This was after college, after working a little bit after college, and just discerned that as the path where the Lord was calling me, and was really blessed to be part of a great ministry. I served with them for 1 year and then was like a staff. You fundraise for your role hybrid for 2 and also worked at a parish connected with them. So you can think about 4.5 years of ministry in the Catholic world. And as that time was wrapping up, one of my mentors, a great guy, actually my former boss, in one of those positions, he said, restlessness is a sign the Lord is going to move you. And that was really true for me in that season of life. And I was also dating my now wife. And there's a joke. It's, what's the difference between a youth minister and a Little Caesars pizza? A Little Caesars pizza can feed a family of four. So I butchered that joke, but it gets the point across, right? That like ministry, it's hard to provide for a family. And I think it's a
Yeah.
special calling to be in it. If you have a family, it's a sacrifice usually. So I chatted with a lot of professionals from HVAC, the pilots to chiropractors, um, people who were professors in colleges. And my uncle, he built up a great business. He's since sold it, but it was worth many millions of dollars, the business that he had, doing financial planning and
Yeah.
financial advising. And he gave me the good, bad, and ugly. And after that season of discernment, I was convicted this is what I want to do. I worked at a large investment company, a grunt on the phone, working with thousands of clients and a lot of big and small money, doing a lot of different things for our advisors and our advised clients, which was that professional introduction into the industry.
Hmm.
And then joined a very successful team after that at a different company to build my own practice.
Very
So,
nice.
somewhat of a meandering path, but I chose Catholics because, practically speaking, I'm Catholic. I want to work with people who are like-minded. And I think most people are like that, regardless of their demographic, right?
Hmm.
I want to work with people who share their values and they have commonality with. Like unity is a good thing in values. And also in my business, the more you can niche, the more you can be specific in who you're speaking to, the better you'll be. Because financial advisors are a dime a dozen. There's a zillion great ones, there's a zillion average ones, there's a
Yeah.
zillion awful ones, right? So you got to separate yourself. So it really was a marriage of business, strategic business planning, who I really want to work with, and deep down beneath that, I think the Lord is calling me to serve this demographic.
That is awesome. I love it. So you mentioned the missionary. So what were you doing with that? Like gone, we talked about it a bit, but tell the audience what it is you do, what
Mm-hmm.
you were doing with your missionary work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the group is called Net Ministries, stands for National Evangelization Teams. It's a great ministry based out of West St. Paul, Minnesota. And essentially, there are teams assembled, usually 8 to 12 or 13 men or women, young adults ages 18 to 28. Uh, and what we would do is some teams travel to the US. Mine was at a parish. So think of that. There's a big parish. I was in Naples, Florida. Well, still is there. And my team of 8, we served under the priests and under the youth minister to support their different ministries. So middle school ministry, confirmation programs, high schoolers, young adult ministry as well. And it was a 9-month service gig. And it was really beautiful, Kristina, because we really got to meet the youth where they were at, really encourage them to have a relationship with Christ. And it was
Hmm.
incredible how we saw the ministry blossom over time.
Yeah,
And
that's
that's what I did the first year. And then I was staff after that.
okay. Got it. Yeah. So that's awesome. So
Mhm.
do you feel that that's helped you being an entrepreneur at all?
Oh yeah, and no, I think like too, like a faith formation coordinator, or a youth minister, you're an entrepreneur because you have to do everything, but you have none of the financial upside, right? Like you could build the perfect ministry that's just this awesome self-running machine with an army of volunteers. Your salary is still 30,000 or 50,000 a year,
Hmm.
right? Like
Hmm.
whatever you're making. Uh, But I think you have a lot of churches ask people to do everything in those roles, which is why the
Yeah.
burnout's pretty high. You got to be admin, so good with the left brain side, right? The numbers, detail, organization, consistency. But then you got to be a people person. You got to be creative. You're making up stuff. You got to entertain middle schoolers and high schoolers,
Yeah.
right? If you're boring, that's just not going to work well. So you have to wear a lot of hats. And as an entrepreneur starting to practice, I'm blessed to be nested within a very professional and prestigious network. So if I need an estate attorney or I need an advisor who deals with ultra high net worth clients, I can just get those resources in office to serve my clients or prospective clients. But it's as an entrepreneur, especially in the early days, you have to do everything. It's a balance. And I think there's a temptation to want to keep doing everything because you can control it. But that's one of the biggest mistakes you can make. You want to outsource as soon as you can to take
Hmm.
off that load and focus on what makes the business money, which as you grow your practice is your name, your brand, and what you bring to your relationships, not how fast you can turn around paperwork.
Yes, absolutely. I know I found that and I've worked with a lot of people with that it's like if you
Mhm.
don't start bringing people in even before it feels ready to, you're probably not going to get
Mhm.
to where you want to be. So I totally get that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what would you say is your biggest challenge as business owner, entrepreneur, building your practice?
Well, I think in my line of work, I mean, the fail rate's 90% for people who, it's around there for people who start out their advisory practices. I'm very blessed where I think more or less I cracked the code with a niche and then a marketing strategy and a branding strategy where my hardest days are already, they've come and gone. Like, right, like
Nice.
if I just keep doing what I'm doing, I'm going to be very successful. And that's another thing, like, all right, Lord, like, seems like I'm on the path to great success. And I come from a lower income household too, so I've never had money much to speak of, but I already see that coalescing that path in the next 5 to 10 years with just the rate I'm bringing in new clients and word of mouth and scaling the marketing, everything. So it's very humbling. But that's the first thought that comes to mind. And ask your question again, because I had two thoughts pop into my brain as you asked
All
that.
right. So what would you say is your biggest challenge, like as you've built your practice
Mhm.
or as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, so I think it's consistency is one big thing. You have to consistently network, consistently market. As I was mentioning, the hard things about being a youth minister and entrepreneur, you have to juggle everything,
Hmm.
right? So as I'm onboarding clients, I'm having to solve organizational issues with Salesforce or Outlook or something, some tool in Microsoft.
Hmm.
And also with a lot of new clients comes a lot of new paperwork, and I'm having to outsource that to people in the office. Like they take 10% of whatever revenue comes from that sort of relationship I'm establishing. But the truth is, I just can't handle 10 life insurance apps at a given time. They're actively in underwriting. Or I
Hmm.
think we're in the process of moving, I think $400,000 right now with a bunch of little accounts. It's just a lot to handle. And I don't have the bandwidth for that. So I think it's striking that balance of getting everything done, outsourcing. And then I think a lot of people in my shoes, they're doing cold calls. I'm very blessed. I don't need to do that. I have people message me so I can be their advisor. So blessed to have that structure and that success. But for people in a lot of businesses starting out, there's a lot of difficult grunt work that lends itself to burnout very quickly.
Hmm.
And so you really have to protect your time but also be consistent with the hard stuff. Like, what is that 10% of activity that generates 90% of your revenue? You have to make sure you're hitting that on the calendar.
Hmm. Absolutely. It's really good.
Mhm.
So let's talk a little bit about how you help your clients. So a lot of people have a lot of maybe negative thoughts around money. So what do you see? You don't have to get specific, obviously, but what's normal that you will see with clients?
Mhm. Yeah. First, how I help clients, I do a non-committal get to know you process. I absorb cost in terms of time or energy. I sometimes do one-time plans for a fee, but it's usually someone who comes to me that I just can sense they're a good fit for that. And it's also going to take a lot of hours to put everything together on the
Hmm.
back end. So it's just worth my time if I'm being compensated, but it's not if I'm not, to put it bluntly. But typically, I do what I call a financial health check, where we have software, we visualize everything that they have from their income, the cash flow to accounts, go through the objective, like the numbers, what's in this account, you know, how did you invest this? And then the subjective, which is how does your faith or your values, how do they affect how you approach money? What's the purpose of this account? Like, for example, I'll ask people laugh at me when I ask this question, like, what's the purpose of your retirement account? They're like, retirement. But I have people say, oh, I was going to sell it all out and buy a house. It's like, well, let's talk about that. Like, you're going to be taxed out the wazoo if you do that. I had an inheritance issue with that. They didn't realize that, it was going to be taxed a lot whenever they pulled it out, if they
Hmm.
pulled it out early. So there's a lot of considerations when it comes to doing that financial health check. So my big value add is I want people to, no matter who I speak with, that I want them to get something out of the conversation. It's not a waste of my time if I walk someone through an hour process, give them clarity where they stand, and then they don't become a client. Because I do good work for people while I'm just starting out in the business. I want to help people out. 5 years, I might be a bit more picky with my time. to be honest, because then I'll have 300 clients to manage throughout the year, for
Mhm.
example. But that's one way I help my clients, and then present solutions, right? Opportunities for partnership, or sometimes just a plan on paper. Hey, do this, save this, stop doing that, and I don't get compensated. That's fine. What I see out there is a hot mess. There is a substantial lack of financial education, and people come up with a lot of weird things in their head
Mhm.
about what they want to do with money.
Interesting.
And so, for example, like we know that certain, probably can't be specific because compliance is going to watch this or something, but um, there are certain parts of the market that average 10% a year, right? Over any 30-year period, averages 10%. So,
Mhm.
as someone who's a do it yourself investor, you hear 10%. All right, if I just put in X number of dollars every year, I'll earn 10%. The issue is the average unadvised investor, I think, earns it's like 3% or so. It depends on the study, but it's really low. And the idea is that if you don't invest well, or you could invest well, but if your approach is you don't put in enough or you put in too much, you might have to edit the plans and you sell at a loss, or you don't take taxes into consideration, you get gutted, or you think you're going to get something tax free, but there's a cost today to that. And people, they get a lot of advice off Google. And the thing is, so as a financial professional, like that disclaimer I gave in the beginning of our conversation, right?
Mhm.
There's a legal basis for that, right? So whenever you find financial information on the internet, it's either generic for liability reasons, or it's someone who's not a professional who's putting themselves out there to be specific. Maybe they're liable. I'm not too familiar. But the point is they probably don't have the credentials, right?
Mhm.
So a lot of people get first Google search bias and then they start to put together a plan. And it's kind of sad because then I get people in their 60s that reach out to me and they don't have a lot to their name. And they could have had a lot more if they made just a couple tweaks, right?
Yeah.
Along the way.
Yeah.
I'll just close by saying we ran an analysis for a client, and at age 95, if they kept doing what they were doing, they'd have 4 million bucks. That's pretty good, right? By the time they're not both 95. We ran another analysis with some tweaks and small changes, like if we partnered with them or if they did anything right. It was a one-time financial plan, so if they just did what we said,
Mhm.
they would die at 95 with $11 million. And what's funny about that, the side by side is if you looked at the numbers, the first 10 years, the returns were identical, but it was making small, good incremental decisions over time that the compounding effect of results started to appear after 10 years. So I
Mhm.
think a lot of people don't know they've made mistakes because how do you measure what you can't see and don't know and what could have been, right?
Yeah.
So you got me on a ramble there, but
Oh,
that's
that's
what I see
fine.
out there in
It's
the ether.
interesting. I mean, it's
Mhm,
such a significant difference, and you're right. Like with
mhm,
the beginning would be the same, I would imagine. But like that's just those little tweaks. Like it's just worth bringing an expert in to help you where things matter, because you know what, as people we have limited
mhm.
time. If we can't be out learning and becoming experts of everything, and I'm assuming you probably have access to different or better or at least more concrete information than most of us who are using Google or whatever else we're using. So
Yeah.
without trying to spend a huge amount of time, bring an expert in to give you a hand where you need it. Again, like outsourcing. So even life is like
Mhm.
entrepreneurship.
Yeah, exactly. And I think even outside of financial planning, like in the business world, like the folks that listen to your podcast, right? It's like you're not an expert in most things.
Hmm.
And you're probably going to do a less than passing job at most things. And even if you can, what is the cost of your time doing everything?
Hmm.
So now that I am a professional, I reach out to professionals and much more, and I listen to their advice a lot more. Like I have a buddy in the mortgage space. If I have mortgage questions, I go to him, right?
Yeah.
Because he's
Yeah.
the expert. Like I'm not. And I think the more you can bring in those sorts of experts into your life, it's worth the money. And to be fair, most of them will give you a free consultation because they're commission based, right?
Yeah.
So you can
Yeah.
kind of squeeze a little bit out of it for free, you know, and you get a
Exactly.
second opinion. So,
Well, it
mhm,
just makes sense though, because again, like you said, we're not experts in everything. And there's no way with the limited time, especially as entrepreneurs, as business owners, as leaders, we can't be. And as a leader, I'm going to throw my leadership out there now, but like as a leader, you can't
Mhm.
afford to become an expert in everything that your team is doing. There's a reason that they do it. Your job is to coach them, make sure they're on the right track, meeting the goals, but you can't, like, I was an engineer, I was a plant manager of a manufacturing plant, and I had engineers, I had quality people, I had maintenance people. I'm like, every single one of these people, finance, HR,
Mhm.
every single one of these people knows more about their area than I do because I came up through operations. So I was like, I can, schedule the plant, I can do these things, do the
Mhm.
improvements, but
Yeah.
I'm not going to be able to tell them how to design that part and make it more efficient. That's their job, and I just have to coach them through it. So it's very much like
Mhm.
using your team and using the experts that you've got in your team, whether they're in house or out of house, is so key. So
Yeah, and if even if you scale it, like the principle applies to macroeconomics. Like if the US can make beer cans and widgets better than, I'm just going to pick on Australia, or Canada, because you're in Canada,
oh,
I'll
there you
say
go.
it.
Click on Canada.
If America makes beer cans and widgets better than Canada, but the way the numbers work out is if America potentially focuses on beer cans, both Canada and America get more beer cans and widgets if they trade with each other. And I think that emphasizes a principle that, and you should Google the math behind it. It's actually kind of interesting how trade works out. But the principle is, yeah, outsource when you can. Though I
Mm-hmm.
suppose politically, there's like maybe social consequences to like tariffs or lack thereof. So I'm not going to get into that. But like the economic numbers principle stands, however you scale it.
Yeah, absolutely. Bring in the experts where you need them. So that's great.
Mhm.
So is there anything like on mindset? Like, do you see that negative mindset that people come in? Are they scared of investing? Are they afraid of it? Like, do you see that at all?
Mm. Yeah, there's a lot of head trash sounds offensive or bad. Um, Someone who's listening to this can Google money scripts. It's essentially half truths we believe about money. So
Mm,
if mom and dad, for example, whenever they were fighting when you were a kid, it was about money, your subconscious or your brain or your heart may have made the conclusion that mom and dad, when they fight, it's about money, therefore money is bad. I
mm,
want to get away from money. So I spend a lot. I don't talk about it. Another result for to someone else might be if mom and dad had more money, it would have solved the problem. They would have been happy. I'm going to seek money because that's going to solve my problems. So there's
mm-hmm,
a lot of half truths that are in people's heads. And that's why most financial plans that people put together on their own is only up in their noggin. And it's in this weird soup of these half truths that we believe about ourselves, about money, you know, the limits of our intelligence, for
mm-hmm.
example. And I think practical mindsets I see, for example, some people struggle to talk about life insurance because they just can't handle the thought of them or their spouse dying.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really tragic because that's probably the worst thing you could do because there's statistically, when we're all going to die, right, at
Yeah.
some point. And even if you're young and insurance is just for when you're young, I mean, go to GoFundMe and search no life insurance in it, right? It'll break
Oh,
your
yeah.
heart. It's very common. Another negative mindset that there's a lot of negative mindsets. I think there's a distaste towards money for a good
Mm,
strata of the population. They see it as greedy or they don't understand the stock market. And I think fundamentally there are, a fair number of bad actors in the economy and the stock market. But overall, principally, I think it's sound. But I think there's advice out there that people just write off the financial system as bad. And it's like, that's fair enough. If you don't want to participate, that you don't want to invest, that's fine. But then where are you going to get $100,000 a year adjusted for inflation, ages 65 to 95? You know, maybe you can find a way that doesn't involve the market. And maybe it's real estate. I don't know.
mm-hmm,
But I think there's a lot of these half truths we believe about money.
mm-hmm.
And the result is our family suffers, right? Not that we're principally sound from a philosophical standpoint. Our family just suffers
Yeah,
because of it.
absolutely. I know as a leader, helping your team or even helping yourself, like sometimes we're our own worst enemy with all of those mindset things. So
Yeah.
how do you help your clients get over that hump? Like, do you kind of ask the questions, figure out what their mindsets are, or do you just kind of keep them looking at the positive? Like, how do you help them?
Yeah. So I think one is just open questions in general, get people thinking. And this is like back to ministry, right? Small group after a talk, asking a high schooler, like, hey, what did you think about when they shared about mercy, for example? So just open questions. I love asking my Catholic clients, hey, in your view as a Catholic, what is the purpose of wealth? And they'll say, some of them have great answers, others like pause and think, others, bless their hearts, kind of BS through it. It's kind of funny to watch sometimes. But it gets people thinking about, hey, what is the purpose of this really? What is this all for? And I do that with a lot of accounts. Like, hey, what is the purpose of this account? Recently, a married couple, they have a joint investment account. It's not for retirement. For one of them, it was for house down payment. For the other one, in their head, it was for the kids' education in college.
Hmm.
So two different views of what the one account was for. So I think just flushing these things through is very healthy. And that's, I think, a value add I'm able to bring to the
Hmm.
conversation is just chatting about it, like a third party asking open questions, a little bit of financial therapy, if you will,
Yeah.
to get you thinking. Um, and I think that brings a lot of mind trash or bad conclusions to light. I was chatting
Hmm.
with someone and he's like, yeah, I'm not timing the market, but I'm waiting for the S&P to go up before I put money back into it. So then I challenged him. Sounds like you're timing the market. You have $400,000 in cash in a bank account and you're waiting for the market to go up, and statistically the best people on Wall Street can't get this right. you know it's time in the market versus timing the market. That's what
Hmm.
separates the men from the boys. So sometimes I'm learning the art of challenging people because I
Ah,
don't want to just provoke or to lead to a sales goal. Like I never want to do that,
yeah.
right? I want to
Yeah.
bring people to a healthy outcome, and if they want to work with me, there's an open door.
Hmm.
But those are some of the things I see and do.
Yeah, that's awesome. Like there is so much help that you can give by doing that challenging, but it takes a level of courage on your end to be able to say, well, are you sure? So that's awesome.
Yeah.
So if you
Mhm.
could give somebody advice on investment, doesn't have to be a where to invest, but like what would you just when you're planning your financial and maybe not investment, but just when you're looking at your financial area, what would be like one piece of advice you'd want to give them?
It's hard to limit it to one. For young folks, there are like after college, there are a lot of expenses coming up. So marriage, so wedding, engagement,
Hmm.
ring, honeymoon, house down payment. In that build up to life, like there's so many expenses coming. Like you need to be saving short and long term because stuff is going to happen. So I think, and maybe to go off to add on to that, to get to that one thing, you think you spend $5,000 a month. That's not the average over the year, right? An HVAC repair, a car repair,
Hmm.
something that comes up. You should assume your outflow is probably at least 15% higher than you're telling yourself when you look at the
Hmm.
monthly budget. And that's why, like, having that emergency fund, that cash that's liquid, is there to absorb hits. Like I saw this a bit when I was a kid growing up, and I see it with other families as well sometimes, that if they don't have an emergency fund, a bucket of cash, that it puts them into survival mode,
Hmm.
which is just highly stressful. It's like we can't afford the best dishwasher, so we'll buy the cheapest one, which will break down in a year. So we have to buy the cheapest one again, right? The cheapest one's 500 and the best is 800. Well, over a year or two, you spent 1,000 when you could have saved 200. And
Hmm.
that's how the rich get richer. They learn how to stay ahead. Um, and you don't have to be rich to do that. There's a great book called The Millionaire Next Door. It's about being prudent in your money and habits millionaires have. Though a million isn't what it used to be,
No, it's
unfortunately.
not.
But yeah, the point stands. So I think the big thing I'll say is assume your outflow is higher than you're telling yourself.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's very, very good. All
Thank you.
right. And if people wanted to get in touch with you and ask you a question, like what's the best way that they could get in touch with you?
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. Happy to chat with anyone. The best way would be just LinkedIn. My name's Will Murley. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. Feel free to message me. Primarily serve Catholic clients, but I help, Christians and non-Christians as well. I help a lot of folks out, though I'd say upwards of 80% of my clients are Catholic. But reach out to me, shoot me a message, book through my calendar. If you're not in the United States, I can't help you, but I have connections in Europe and in Canada as well, and I can point you in the right direction. I can give you a referral as well if you need advice and you're outside the US, in North America or Europe. I don't know about like Hong Kong or something, but
Yeah, there you go.
point is just reach out, say hello, have a conversation.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your experience, your knowledge, and just coming on today. Really appreciate it. And so thanks again. And if you enjoyed today's episode, then be sure to share it, subscribe, and if you're on YouTube, leave a comment and leave a review, because that is how we get more of that information out to everybody else. So I will see you next time on the next episode of the Business Building Blocks podcast. Thanks for tuning in to the Business Building Blocks podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what's next. If you found value in our conversation, please leave a quick review, like, or share. It helps us reach more amazing listeners like you. For more resources and insights, visit KristinaSchmidt.ca, where you can find tools and support to empower your leadership journey. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.